Hello. This week we're going to talk about behaviorism, classical conditioning, and operant conditioning, and how this relates to young children. We'll start off with a quote by John B. Watson. "Give me a dozen healthy infants, well formed, in my own specified world in which to bring them up, and I'll guarantee to make any one at random and train him to become any type of specialist I might select. A doctor, a lawyer, an artist, a merchant chief, and yes, even a beggar man or a thief, regardless of his talents, penchants, tendencies, abilities, vocation, and the race of his ancestors." As I read this quote, take a moment to think about your overall thoughts on this quote. And what extent do you believe this to be true or false? And why? Can you really train anyone to become anything? This quote was written in the 1920s. And today we have a better understanding of behavior, and we know it's not completely malleable. You cannot shape anyone into anything based solely on environment. We're not all born with the same potentials and talents, and this is regardless of training, rewards, and punishments. John B. Watson was a behaviorist, and overall, behaviorists care about universalities of behaviors across species. They care about uniformity and, again, universal behaviors. So any behaviors can be applied to any species. So study a convenient species. By convenient species, if you are looking at universal behaviors, would you study an elephant or would you study a lab rat? Think about how convenient it is to work with smaller and more inexpensive animals. So under this premise, a lab rat's behavior equals the behavior of a pigeon, which equals the behavior of an elephant, which also could equal our own behaviors. Behaviorists believe that any behavior can be shaped into greater or lesser frequencies or even extinguished. Reward the organism, likely to repeat. Punish or no reward, less likely to repeat. And all you need to do to control the behavior is with rewards or punishment. This is easy to do in a lab environment and difficult to do in a natural environment. Behaviorists often use the term organism, and it's a very good way to observe if it is a behaviorist point of view, is by using that terminology or seeing that terminology in literature. While behaviorism was going on in the United States, it gave birth to ethology in Europe. And so in ethology, it's a search for behavioral variety, and it emphasizes how the species has evolved. It looks at unique behaviors and unique demands given to different species. This is done with open-minded observations in natural habitats. So while we have the behaviorists in lab coats and participating in labs and highly organized and controlled tasks, we have the ethologists in hiking boots watching and asking themselves, what is that behavior? What triggered that behavior? What did the behavior teach the organism? How did it evolve those behaviors? And how is this behavior adaptive? Ethologists would argue that observing a lab rat in a maze is the same as observing a whale's ability to swim in a bathtub. They're environments that are not ones that you would see in naturalistic observations, and they're created. Ethology also points out that behaviorism can be wrong. Research shows that infant rats or monkeys will still love an abusive mother. This is also true for humans. Ethologists take into account sensory triggers, vocalizations that might intimidate or seduce, and visual triggers such as a cute baby face that calls for others in the species to take care of him or her. Behaviorism Although has weaknesses, it has given us some amazing theories, such as attachment theory, classical conditioning, and an understanding of PTSD. Again, although this method isn't perfect, there is no such thing as a perfect method. Take a minute and reflect on what are some of the pros and cons of ethology and behaviorism. The lab setting versus the natural setting. Looking at universal behaviors versus looking at behavioral varieties. If you were to do research, what method would call to you and why?